So I would like to call to order this school committee meeting for April 24th, 2023. Could we please rise to pledge for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone, for being here this evening, early this evening. Oh, great, we have our student, wow. We have our student rep here, that's great. Very good, thank you. Yeah. Great, okay, so anyway, roll call. Okay.
Kathleen Amaral.
Here.
Chris Oliver.
Here.
Elizabeth Coughlin.
Here.
Shannon Jenkins.
Here.
John Nunes.
Yep.
Great. So I ask everybody, including myself, I think I did it, to turn anything that's ringing off. I just want to mention that this meeting is being broadcast by DCTV, live broadcast, correct? And will be rebroadcast on Channel 9 on Wednesday and Thursday at 5, Friday at 6 a.m., Saturday at 8 a.m., and Sunday at 2 p.m., and then again on Channel 18 on Monday and Saturday at noon, on Thursday at 3 p.m. We begin each meeting with allotting 10 minutes for public comment, and so that I ask if anyone here would like to come up to the podium for public comment, please do so. We allot 10 minutes, and so just in case a lot of people want to come up, be mindful of keeping your remarks short and stating your name first. Come on up.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Lauren Enochson. I am a Dartmouth resident and a parent to 3 children, 2 of which are in the Dartmouth school system. My husband and I are graduates of Dartmouth High School, class of 2005 and class of 2006. I am a social studies teacher at Dartmouth High School, where for the past 6 years I have taught mainly AP World History, but also psychology, U.S. History 1, U.S. History 2, and World History. I have been a co-advisor of the National Honor Society and an assistant choreographer for the Dartmouth High Theater Company since 2018. It has been, in my time of being involved with these clubs, I and my fellow colleagues who take on these extra responsibilities have not seen an increase in our stipends. This includes stipends for not only clubs and activity positions, but also sports coaches, music programs like marching band, indoor percussion, indoor color guard, and class advisors that put on large-scale events like prom and other fundraisers. These types of positions require people to put in a lot of unseen work, hours of work that is more than what is just implied in the description posting for a stipend position. My own position as co-advisor, we regularly spend at least 100 hours a year between fundraising activities and preparing for the induction ceremony for the next incoming class of members. Like my colleagues, I would say we all do this for the kids. Why else are we in education? We do it for the kids. But at the same time, I do it also because I enjoy it. And as much as I hear thanks, it doesn't really feel like it when I'm not being compensated for my time, when our teachers haven't gotten a raise in their stipend positions in over 10 years. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. Renee Vieira, co-president of the Dartmouth Educators Association. And on behalf of all the DEA members and my co-president, Jody Parisi, we would just like to welcome Dr. June Saber McGuire to our school committee meeting tonight, and we look forward to having positive relationships with you in the years to come. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stealing our thunder, Renee.
You are.
Sure.
Since, if nobody else is up, I guess we'll close public comment, but since you just sort of stole our thunder, I would love, as chair, to turn it over to my co-chair, who spent some time doing the grit work and getting, and part of the original committee to,
Yep, with Dr. Jenkins.
with Dr. Jenkins, to do a nice announcement, a formal announcement. Please.
Sure.
Turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. Since we were going to hold this off till other matters, but if it's okay with the committee, we'll make the announcement official. As many of you have read in the paper this past week, or even today, I think, was when the Standard Times got a hold of it, is that it is now official, and on behalf of the Dartmouth School Committee, we'd like to welcome Dr. Saban McGuire here with us this evening and congratulate her on this position, as well as looking forward to working with us. I will say that in seems like the past 2 months now, that Dr. Jenkins, myself, and some other committee members from the screening committee that's here this evening, we had the opportunity to meet with her first and continue the process. I've had some very fruitful conversations with Dr. Saban McGuire, and I look forward to working with her in the coming, at least for the next 2 years under my tenure here on this committee. And I'd just like to open it up, if it's okay with you, to anyone else.
I don't want to put you on the spot. Would you love to come up to the podium to share a little bit? Great, excellent.
So, I think it's already on?
It is.
Okay, so first of all, I am thrilled to be here, and thank you so much for your warm welcome. I have to say that what attracted me to Dartmouth after that first, I would say to the screening committee first, thank you so much, because I could see how much work that the screening committee put in to really vetting the candidates and to putting forward the finalists to the school committee. So and eternally grateful to the screening committee who saw fit to bring me forward. I also have to say that the folks that were school and district-based people who spent the day with me and the day in the district, and I know I wasn't the only candidate, so I so appreciate the time and the attention that you gave me that day to give me a real feel for who the people were in the Dartmouth Public Schools. Beyond that, I have to thank the students. I had an amazing experience meeting with a group of students at Dartmouth High School. They were thoughtful, really insightful, and gave me so much hope for the future, our future generation. And you should be so proud as a school community and a Dartmouth community, because if those students are representative of the student body in your school system, then you are really well on your way to having an outstanding school system. So congratulations. I listened to one of your teachers just speak about all the extra work they do. That is the work. I heard the students talk again about Mr. I'm going to say Ryan, because Mr. Shea, who says school doesn't end at 2:00, and that's because of the folks like yourself who are out there providing students with all those additional opportunities. I also want to say, and I know you have a long night ahead of you, so I'll keep it short. That's why I wrote notes, because I knew that would be important, that my commitment to Dartmouth, you need to know that I will be fully committed. I was here last week. I got to spend some time with Mr. Kiley and Ms. Genther. have to get used to that rolling off my tongue, Genther, and other folks in your school department. And again, so warm and welcoming. I felt so right at home. It does not hurt that I could see a little bit of water out my window. It's a little bit of a different environment than I'm used to. So I'm super excited to be in such a, and it's just more than that. It's more than the physical space. It's the people in the physical space. And I want to say that I'm especially thankful to the committee who saw fit to vote to bring me here as your superintendent. And my commitment to the community is that as your superintendent, I will do everything within my influence to work with every single one of you and everybody in the community, because I know Dartmouth is already a well-respected school system, but I look forward, again, Mr. Shea and I talked about elevating the school to the best school in the state. And when I think about that, I think about it as a school district. And so really, I am just thrilled to be here, and I'm already ready to get to work. And I will be available at any time for anyone that needs to reach out or wants to talk. I plan on spending time in the district in the next few months. So thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you.
I need
Thank you.
I need some Dartmouth swag.
We've got a great school store that's got plenty of swag.
All about the sweatshirts, as some of you already know.
Do my colleagues want to just say a few words?
Yeah, let's see if my voice can hold up.
Oh,
But,
no.
No, it's been a long weekend. But, Dr. Saban McGuire, thank you and welcome. And, you and I have had a couple of conversations on the phone, and I look forward to working with you. It's an honor and a privilege.
Yep, I'll also just say welcome. We're really happy to have you on board, and we look forward to working with you.
Yep. Same here. We're the newbies. Look forward to growing with you.
I think I've said it all.
Yeah, thank you. I'm thrilled to have you as well, and it was nice meeting with you last week and making it official, and then again here tonight having you sort of for the community to see. So thank you. We're really grateful to have, happy to have you and thrilled to see what's to come. Thank you. Great, excellent. Next on, now moving on to our approval of minutes. I will entertain a motion for the regular session minutes from April 10th.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Chair hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and next we have, I will entertain a motion to accept the executive session minutes for that same evening of April 10th.
Gee, I get to do this, huh? So moved, Madam Chair, with the stipulation that they be held until the matter for which they were intended is complete.
Second.
Second, I also note that we're always so relieved when Mr. Nunes is back to make that motion. It's just like, we're all stumbling over the word. So we're glad you get to make that motion again, Mr. Nunes.
Great, oh, sorry. Any discussion on that? No, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great, and next we're moving on to old business. I'm going to turn it over to you, Mr. Kiley, to talk about the fiscal year 24 budget.
Thank you, Mrs. Amaral. So on Friday, a little late, we received some information from the town regarding this joint meeting. So it appears, everything that we were provided with appears that the current proposal on the town side is to fund us at a 3.1% increase. So we remain at that $588,000 deficit that we had previously talked about. I don't know what this meeting tonight is going to look like in terms of discussion beyond the materials that were presented. Obviously, I hope that we can advocate for the schools because it is going to have an impact. I can see a few ways to approach this deficit. I think we can either collaborate and try and figure out a way to narrow the gap. We could, as Mr. Nunes discussed, we could go to town hall and fight for it, regardless of other recommendations. we could cut the budget. We could look at one-time sources of funding to stem the gap until we're able to address the impending ESSER cliff and sort of roll this into that. So those are really the four options that I see before us. If the boards tonight express some interest to work on this, I'd be happy to do that. I've certainly been open to that, and you know, hope that that's the preferred option for the group. If it isn't, then we have some hard decisions to make moving forward. So some of them probably won't be able to wait until our May 15th meeting. For instance, if we have to do a reduction in force, one of the contracts that would be impacted requires, well, it actually recommends notice by April 15th. It allows notice up until May 15th, no later than May 15th. So May 15th is our next meeting. So we may have to consider options for that. And obviously, I'll be prepared to do whatever we have to do, depending on how the other boards react tonight, and what kind of support we can gain. But there's some significant decisions that are going to have to be made if we can't somehow stem this gap. You know, I think I've been here for 12 years. I think that the town has the ability to address this if there's the will to do it. It's not easy. You know, you'd have to maybe give up other things to address this, but I think that should at least be a conversation to be had, right? So, I don't know. So I'm hopeful, going to try and be optimistic that tonight will be, you know, that we'll have an opportunity for actual discourse on this, and that it's not just what it says in the materials that was sent to us. So that's my hope. I'd be happy to talk about it some more if you have questions or thoughts.
Thank you for that. Do my colleagues have questions? Dr. Jenkins?
So, you know, you laid out some options for us, and I will say personally, I do not feel comfortable using one-time revenues to close the hole. We're already gonna have issues in the next fiscal year. It just puts us in an even worse spot next year. If there were some immediate plans to try to address this through an override or something like that, I might feel a little bit more confident about that, but given the absolute lack of plans at this point, I feel very strongly that that option is not really, unfortunately, available to us right now. So I'm also hopeful that we can make some progress, you know, tonight, but I think, you know, basically we've got to come to some compromise, or we've got to reduce.
Mr. Oliver?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with Dr. Jenkins on this. I'm not in favor. I know, you know, we've done a great job. Mr. Kiley's done a great job with managing our one-time revenue source of school choice. But we were expecting some kind of serious deficit next year with ESSER going away. So I am certainly of the mindset that if we were to look at using one-time revenue this year to fix this problem, it's only going to grow exponentially next year. So, you know, as much as it pains me, the FinCom and the Select Board really need to understand where we're at, and I think we need to make it clear to them that if we don't see anything, you know, any kind of movement this evening, that contractually we're going to have no choice as to say what it is, start pink slipping people. That's where we're at with this. And I agree with Mr. Kiley. I think the town does have the capacity to fund us. I'm not sure, do we know what was their certified free cash this year?
5 million this past year, a little over.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Nunes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I totally agree with Chris and Shannon on this. Yes, you can put this date on the calendar, too. We agree. But in all seriousness, if, I did have a discussion with Mr. Kiley beginning of last week about, a couple of one-time revenues that sits in the back of my head. And, the consensus was, yeah, we can use it, and, the cliff in 25 really, jumps out at us type of deal, and I agree. I think the money is there. As I said to Mr. Kiley, and I said at the last meeting, I'm going to find it. I'm going to do something, and I'm going to make the motion at town meeting and adjust our budget by that, $1 million for round figures type of deal, and I'll figure the accounts out. I will let the town clerk, the town moderator know. She'll have that motion from me beforehand if we don't get the budget that we need. It's as simple as that. I mean, this is, no, I won't even go there. This is just not acceptable, period.
Anyone else have anything to share? Yeah, I personally not in favor of utilizing our one-time funds for all the reasons that everyone else shared. And also, in addition to, we have the makeup of our committee is different. We're already compromising, which in my recollection, doing some shifting, and while we're thinking about those smaller class sizes, size of our class is going to be impacted, and that could sway the vote in terms of, yes, we have, how many years has it been that we've, 7 years, 6 years, school choice?
Oh, school choice,
Voting?
I think it's about 7.
7 years, yeah. I think it was right before I got on. That's going to be something to consider in terms of what the class sizes and the impact of what we're already compromising with is going to do. And so for all the reasons and that reason, it's just not the right thing to do. We might not have that money, and we're going to need it for that cliff. Mr. Nunes?
Yeah, I mean, you're right with school choice. I mean, if the committee changes completely around the other way, I mean, in the course of 4 years, that money's gone.
Right.
And that hole is, that's worse than a black hole.
Right.
Type of deal, so.
Yeah.
We've got it, there's gonna be issues, so.
Yeah. Mr. Kiley?
So, I, as a fiscally conservative guy who is in charge of making sure we stay afloat, am very uncomfortable using one-time funds for a recurring problem, right, that we have. We do have, and Mr. Nunes and I touched base about this last week. He had inquired about a particular one-time revenue. Well, it's not revenue, it's funds, the kindergarten fund. It's $322,030. That's the full-day kindergarten reserve fund that was put in place when we first began to go to full-day kindergarten. We had half-day kindergarten for a long time. It's never been used. It sits there. We put the money into it with our own budget dollars through the years. We haven't contributed to it in quite a number of years. It could be a solution, in a short-term solution. What I would say about using one-time funds is the only way that I would be comfortable with that is if there was a plan, and a plan to address long-term the difficulty that we face. So that might be an override. If that existed and we could stem the tide until we were able to actually gain momentum and hopefully get an override, then I could wrap my head around that in terms of recommending something like that. But those, I understand, and I wouldn't do it just to wait a year to then cut the same position. I wouldn't do that. But if we had a plan in place that we were going to attempt to address this more permanently, then I think it might be worth considering.
Okay, anything else?
I have some free cash numbers I could share. So since Mr. Oliver asked, it was $5,513,056 this year. Or that would be fiscal year 22's certified. That's the last number that we have. It was $5,368,000 the year prior.
What was it the year prior again?
$5,368,033.
Thank you.
The year prior to that, fiscal year 20, it was $6,378,908. The year prior to that, in fiscal year 19, it was $6,341,645. I can also tell you that local receipts, the excess local receipts, so that means receipts that are received that above what is budgeted for local receipts. It's an important number. Fiscal year 22, $1,951,904. Actually, there's another number in there, but it's somewhere between, I don't have those numbers actually at my fingertips, but it's somewhere between 1,000,005 and the 1,000,009 that I just mentioned. Fiscal year 21 was more than $1 million. Fiscal year 20 and fiscal year 19 were more than $3 million. So fiscal year 20 and 19 didn't face the impact of the pandemic. Fiscal year 21 and 22 bore the brunt of the pandemic. That's why you see those local receipt numbers dip. Hopefully, if the economy, stays afloat, we can, hope to see larger numbers there as well moving forward. So that's things to think about. Now, those funds are used for good purposes. They're not just hidden away. They're used to promote capital improvement projects in the town that we've benefited from a great deal. And those are necessary, so I'm not suggesting that, that's not a good use of them. It is. However, I think that the discussion should at least be something that we could take part in as to, what those funds are used for, so.
Thank you.
Based on their own financial policies, I believe they said that free cash should be somewhere in the ballpark between 3 to 5% of the total operating budget each year. So, even with their own policies, that's still considerably over.
90 million be 2.7 to 2.7 to 4.5.
Yeah.
So they're still ahead of the game.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Any other questions in advance of us in the meeting? No. Thank you. And so next, we're going to move on to new business, where historically we vote as a committee for the last day of school.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you,
Sure, so we had one snow day.
Yes.
And it was Dr. Gifford's snow day. It was not me. I can't take any credit for that. She got to do that right on her way out the door, so good for her. And so the last day of school right now is June 14th. And so we'd just like to, if you could vote that, make it official. That will be the last day of school for the 2022-2023 school year.
great. I will entertain a motion that we deem June 14th, 2023, the last day of school.
Madam Chair, make that motion that June 14th, 2023 be the last day of school, subject to change if necessary.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion?
So that'll make middle school graduation the 13th.
Okay,
Yep.
13th. Great.
Polish up your speech, Chris.
It'll be quick.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Unanimous?
Thank you.
Excellent. And next, I'm going to ask Mr. Kiley that you talk a little bit about the next item, which is the 2023 Summer Sports Camp.
Yeah, so this is another exciting one here. So we have been running the summer sports camp for a number of years. It serves students entering grades 2 through 9. I'd like to ask that you consider a little flexibility, and we might squeak some first graders into that mix this year. But there's 9 different sports. It's over, let's see, it starts June 19th through July 21st. Last year we had 406 students participate, so really good numbers. Lots of activities. We have baseball, softball, field hockey, flag football, basketball, lacrosse, soccer, volleyball, track and field. We are not going to increase the rates this year, so they're going to remain, for the full weeks, they're going to remain at $80 a week. And for the 4-day week, was it the July 4th week, is $65. And it's a great camp, and any money that we earn from the camp goes to help support our phys ed and athletic programs, so it's a good one.
That's great.
Megan, do you have any questions?
So I just have one question. You know, we've been talking a lot about stipends and how we pay for, you know, people who support all the great programming we do. And I was kind of interested looking at your data about enrollment and coaches' expense, because one would assume that those would correlate, but they don't seem to correlate. Like, some camps are big and there's low coaching expense, some camps are small and there's high coaching expense. So I just want to make sure that all our coaches, I mean, it's a real deal at $80 a week. I mean, it's a real deal. I want to make sure that all of our coaches are being adequately compensated and that they're being equitably compensated.
I understand. Some of it is relating to the supervision for the particular sport, which can be different, like from sport to sport, as to how many students you can serve in a given sport. So that sometimes there's multiple folks helping out with some sports, depending on the numbers of kids and what needs to get accomplished. So, but
So there could potentially be more than one coach?
yeah.
But, like, so for instance, girls lacrosse, there was 36 people and the coaching expense was $430. Girls field hockey, there was 33 participants and nearly $1,300 in coaching expenses. So maybe there's 2 in the latter, but then it strikes me that the person doing lacrosse is maybe doing twice the work because they're supervising the same number of people, right?
We also
and that's
utilize,
Coming from the Midwest, I'm not really, still don't know how lacrosse and field hockey are all that different, but they seem pretty similar to an outsider like me. So that's just what I'm kind of curious about.
I understand.
Right?
We also do utilize some volunteers. I can get you some more data as to how many people we have in each group, but we also do utilize some volunteers to assist. So I can provide you with more information if you'd like about.
Yeah, and just, I mean, I'd like for us to keep it in mind about, from my experience, it's been a while as a parent shopping for camps, $80 is a total steal. So, you know, maybe it's time for us to consider increasing that slightly so that our coaches get an increase in their stipend.
Yeah.
Even at $100, it would be a major steal.
We did consider an increase, and where we are with the camp, we felt like we wanted to get as many kids participating as possible, so we kept it, but we have considered one for this year, but we'll push that off till next year. I think, at this point.
Anyone else? You know, I always sort of bring up something that is under consideration, but just making sure that, you know, a couple of the offerings are outside of the extended school year, so that students who are in summer school are able to also participate and not, you know, affect the education piece. But you've always been good about that, but I always want to make sure I ask. So are we voting on this, or is it just, it's
I think I
in,
just a vote for your support to operate the summer sports camp, since we are charging
Okay.
students for it.
will I entertain a motion that we that we move forward with the summer sports camp.
So moved.
Second.
Great. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Great,
Thank you.
thank you. And what do we have next? Superintendent
wow.
update?
Doing a lot of talking here. I can't wait till I don't have to do this again. So, May 4th, 5th, and 6th, we have Mamma Mia at the high school, so that's exciting. I think I'm going May 4th, so I think I'm going to the first one. The last time I saw Mamma Mia, my oldest daughter was in my wife's belly. We saw it in Boston, so I'm like, okay, she's 20 now, so it's been a while since I've seen Mamma Mia, but I'm looking forward to it. And tickets are available at dhstheaterco.booktix.com, so get your tickets. Spring sports are about a third of the way through now in their season. It's flying by. Teams are off to a great start. Participation was really substantial, more than we anticipated this spring, so that's been great. One thing I did want to mention, since it's somewhat budget related as well, we had a tiered focus monitoring visit from the Department of Ed that I mentioned at a previous school committee meeting. The one area of focus was on our ELL program. So we had proposed, you probably remember, in our budget, an additional ELL teacher. This is a unofficial draft finding, so this is not a finding for sure at this point, but it appears it will be, that we need to provide more support with, in the ELL program overall, and more time for kids in that program. So we knew that was, coming, obviously planned for it and built it into the budget, but, so that'll be an official one. We'll share obviously the official results when we get them.
Great,
That's about it.
thank you. Anyone else have anything to, Mr. Nunes?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Couple of things regarding the music program. Our color guide was out in Dayton, Ohio last week for WGI, World Guard International Finals. Unfortunately, they ran into a tough streak between an early seed and 50 groups in the category, and only 20 or 25 advancing to the semifinals. They didn't get out of the preliminaries, unfortunately, but they've had a good year overall. This past weekend, our percussion ended up in 6th place Saturday night. Had the best show of the year. I think from what I saw of the groups, and that from before Dartmouth right to the end, which was Chino Hill, our students were the only ones that got a full standing ovation. I mean, they just absolutely rocked the house, and it was great to see, type of deal. And then, let's see, today's Monday. Yesterday, I'm losing days here. Yesterday afternoon, our WINS program, which is in their second year only, placed 3rd overall, type of deal. And that's moving up a category. They went from Scholastic A to Open class, so which is a higher and tougher class. And they did a phenomenal job. The students were great. They had a good time all week and such. So I'm personally very proud of them. So that's what's up with them.
Great. I was watching seeing some pictures on social media. It was really great to see.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
It's always interesting. I apologize. It's always interesting. I mean, we're on Saturday night. We're unloading the truck. This is 5:00 Saturday. We're unloading the truck with all the pit equipment, and percussion and that type of thing. And there are people, mobbing around the truck, watching. All we're doing is unloading. That type of deal. And then when they start warming up, type of deal, it's just a mad show.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's so good. Great. Anyone else? Anything? Well, I'm excited to share. Well, first I will say, I think Wednesday night, the middle school has National Junior Honor Society induction. I think a little over 40 students which will be, I think it's, I don't even know, 7 o'clock. I don't know, I have to read my memo, but at any rate, that's exciting. And then I'm also want to mention, because we're not meeting again until after this event, but the Dartmouth Special Ed Parent Advisory Council is hosting in person again our community resource and craft fair. And so it's a free community event. We have well over 140 tables of local craft vendors and local South Coast community resource vendors. And all, there's also Phoenix on the Fly, it's going to have a food truck there. And all proceeds benefit, we put it right back into the school's unified athletic program. We support the Unified Bowling Club. We support Dartmouth's Best Buddies chapter. And this year in particular, we're a portion of what is received through the craft vendors rent a space. The resource vendors are free. To support the new Atlas transition program, advancing towards life after school. So Sunday, May 7th at Dartmouth High School between 10 and 3, I encourage folks to stop on by. It's a fun day, and we're just excited to be back in person. And that's all I have. And
That's May 7th.
Sunday, May 7th, 10 to 3. I'm so excited. I'm exhausted, but excited. Great, and so that's all I have. Our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, May 15th at 6:30 back at Dartmouth High School in the auditorium. Is that wrong?
Yeah.
Okay, so back in our usual location.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be reading my notes.
Unless we're going to have a really big crowd that we don't know about yet.
I was hoping not. So back in the media center at the high school. And so with that, I may need help with this. I will entertain a motion for us to adjourn into joint session with the Select Board and Finance Committee and to return to open session in order for us.
No, because I'll make the motion to go right to executive session from there.
Okay. Thank you.
Unless council tells me different.
So we just need a motion to adjourn.
Just a motion to
Motion to adjourn.
Into executive.
Motion to adjourn this meeting
Meeting
and to
Into the
attend.
joint session.
Back in open session, the joint.
Attend
you.
a joint session with the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee at 6:30.
You're making
I
that
will
motion?
entertain that motion.
Second.
I'll second it. All in favor? Oh, well, roll call?
No, we don't need to roll
No,
call.
okay.
All
All in
in
favor? Aye.
Aye.
6:30 PM. We have the joint meeting with the Finance Committee and the School Committee. Both committees are sworn in. Have open meeting. All set? Okay. And we're going to have a town budget discussion and a town meeting warrant review, Schedule A.
Trying to do introductions.
Right. First and foremost, introductions. We'll start over the school. Mr. Oliver?
So I, Kathleen Amaral, Chair of the Dartmouth School Committee, and I will just, should I just introduce you, or? You can, go ahead.
Elizabeth Coughlin, member, school committee.
Chris Oliver, Vice Chair, Dartmouth School Committee.
Shannon Jenkins, member of the school committee.
John Nunes, member of the school committee.
Jim Kiley, Assistant Superintendent, Finance and Operations, Interim Superintendent.
Thank you. Finance.
Chair.
You're up.
Janine Simmons, Vice Chair of the Finance Committee.
Bob Garvin, Chair of the Finance Committee.
Bill Bowles, member of the Finance Committee.
Terry Hand, member of the Finance Committee.
John Souza, member of the Finance Committee.
Peppy Heidekoper, member of Finance.
Brian O'Hare, member of the Finance Committee.
Gary Carrero, Director of Finance, Town Treasurer, Town Collector.
This is a fairly monumental meeting. A lot of issues are coming to bear for all of us, including our guest teachers here as well. This is to me, and to Mr. McGinnis, we had many conversations about preparation for this meeting. There's a lot to be said. There's some ground to cover that we may have never covered, certainly in the recent past. We want to have a quality conversation. Our job here is to inform our citizens about what we do, how we do it, and what our decisions are, so they can make decisions if it comes to that down the road. a civil conversation, having respect for each other is what this is absolutely demands, and we're going to make sure that that happens during this meeting. So without further ado, any other comments from our board?
Okay, I have a presentation on the budget.
Thank you.
All right, good evening. I'm Sean McInnes, the town administrator. I mean, many of you probably have never met me, but nice to meet you all. I'll be going over the annually I give a budget presentation to the select board and the finance committee. This year it's a little more important in light of the economic atmosphere we're in to kind of give an overall budget perspective to all three boards and committees and talk about some issues we're having, the future, both present and future, and how to deal with those. So. Tonight's overview is going to be what the budget planning is based on, and really it's based on the select board's goals and our financial management policies. Every year we set a budget policy statement. I'll give you an overview of the budget, both expenditures and revenues, some FY24 budget proposed changes, talk about the school budget support and challenges that go along with that, other town challenges, both short and long term, and a budget outlook overall. So the base budget revolves around the select board goals, like I said. I'll go through the goals real quickly, but the first one is a basic fundamental goal of town government. Maintain sound fiscal health and low taxes without overrides. Identify strategies to balance the budget within the constraints of Proposition 2.5, new growth and local receipts. We also want to expand economic growth, development, and redevelopment efforts to support commercial businesses. We have a large commercial base, and we really work hard to support that. And really to take a look at more long-range strategic planning. And you'll hear a number of projects, and you should have heard that we really try to take a long-range look at a number of capital projects in areas in town that we will look to develop. Number 4 is a long one. We continue to evaluate current town-wide service levels. Basically, we want to identify some operational and organizational efficiencies that we can implement, both with technology and through staffing, to provide better customer service to residents and businesses and the general public. Also, number 5, improve communication and transparency with the public. This is important this year, which I'll get into a little bit later. And support modern governance enhancements and foster a culture of excellence in town, which we really try to do. And I think the town shows that. There's a big turnout of support for a variety of issues. Now we cover our financial policies. The financial policies are reviewed by all three boards, voted on and approved. You may recall last year, 2 years ago, we made a change to the financial policies. We need buy-in from the finance committee, the select board, and the school committee for these things. Basically, it's proposed a balanced budget. I won't go through all these in detail, but fully fund our operating budget, adequate maintenance and replacement of capital, having a 5-year capital plan. Number 6, ongoing operating costs shall be funded by ongoing revenue sources. That's really important. Maintaining our free cash between 2.5% and 5% of general fund operating revenues. Any free cash should be utilized for capital or other non-recurring expenditures. I think you see we do that yearly. And then appropriations from the stabilization fund to maintain that at 10% of general fund operating revenue. This is a change we made a couple of years ago. We're currently at about 9.7, 9.8%. By fall town meeting, I think we'll meet this goal. This is really important for the auditors and the bond rating agencies to maintain that stabilization fund. Kindergarten stabilization fund, our OPEB, other post-employment benefits. This is our contribution yearly. It doesn't fully fund our ARC, our annual required contribution, but we do make a significant contribution to OPEB every year. The others are related to our debt service, making sure 50% of our outstanding principal will be paid within 10 years. Talking about long-term debt, and then user fees for all operations should be reviewed annually, which we do, and I think you've seen we've made some changes in the last few years. Pursue grants and gifts. Pursue economic development strategies, and this is important to balance the high quality of residential living with economic diversification and growth, and to sustain the town's relatively low tax burden. That's important to a lot of people. And have good sound investment practices and policies. So, every year in the fall, we establish a budget policy statement for all departments to follow as they prepare the following year budget. So this fall for FY24, We present it to all departments, preserve essential town services, keep the base budget funded without service loss or tax increases beyond Proposition 2.5. No net increases in expense budgets unless the uncontrollable costs require an increase. This really revolves around, a lot of times, software maintenance agreements. They go up, so we need to cover those costs. Evaluate current organization and staffing roles and responsibilities, develop new staffing and organizational plans. We'll be doing that again this year. I think you saw last year we made some significant changes on the municipal side to our organization and staffing to provide better service to the public, to elevate and take advantage of some skill sets of existing staff, and help with succession planning. We want to fully fund contractual wage increases, pension and insurance obligations, continue to level fund the non-levy debt. We continue to pursue grant funds for capital and some operational expenses. And this year, we're trying to incorporate an increase of 3.1% for the Dartmouth schools. An overview of our preliminary budget. You can see we're projecting about $103 million, almost $104 million budget for this year. And that's kind of how it breaks down between revenues, expenses, and other amounts. This is a detailed breakdown of that same budget. You can see property taxes is the main form of revenues. State aid, from the governor's budget, we had hoped that we would be getting more state aid here in Dartmouth. It really hasn't panned out that way. Our local receipts, they seem to be steady. We're being optimistic with that. But then when you look at our operating expenses, we're at about $100 million. Other amounts that we need to raise from the overlay, from our state and county assessments and offsets. So that all equals out to about $103 million, up from almost 1.2 last year. As many of you know, the general fund operating expenses, that includes the schools, public safety, public works, community services, general government, debt service, benefits, and insurance. This is a breakdown of kind of those operating expenses. You can see the schools. This includes both Dartmouth schools as well as the Voc Tech and Aggie. Benefits are 16%. So, and that's our health insurance. That eats up a lot of that. You can see the breakdown as well. Operating revenues, it's mostly property taxes, state aid, local receipts, overhead and direct costs. Here's a breakdown of that. I won't get into this in too much detail. It's in your slides and your packets. But you can see property taxes are our main form of revenue, as well as state aid. That really makes up, almost 3/4, more than, almost our whole revenue budget. And then we have local receipts, about 10%. Just by way of information, property taxes as they relate to Proposition 2.5, the levy limit increase from year to year by the 2.5 automatic increase. If we have new growth, that can go into the levy limit, and also tax overrides if they're proposed and passed, that goes into the levy limit. For your information, so for FY23, the average home assessment was $421,000. With our tax rate at 8.78 per thousand, the average tax bill is $3,696, and that's significant. We recognize that, the board recognizes that, so our goal is to keep that low. Here's how the breakdown of the property taxes go. 96% is the base levy. New growth is 1%. The additional 2.5% we're allowed to implement is a small portion of that, as well as debt exclusions is 1%. So this is important. You heard me refer to this earlier. Our state aid trend is really flat. Back in 2009, it was somewhat significant. It really dipped for a number of years, and we're just reaching 2009 levels now. And it's gone up modestly this year. So any decrease in state aid will have a significant effect on the town's budget. So while it didn't increase, this year it didn't. It didn't decrease this year. It didn't increase as much as we had hoped. Trends in local receipts, you can see this goes up and down a little bit. You can see FY20 and 21, those were COVID years where it decreased significantly. Things like COVID can happen, quite often. I think we've seen that, so we're really sensitive to our estimates on local receipts. We try to be optimistic, but also cautious at the same time. New growth trends, you can see the red line is where we estimate $600,000 annually for new growth. Some years we're at that. You go back to 2015, 16, 17, that was the expansion of South Coast. That was significant. We haven't seen something that significant since then, but If you go back to FY '22, we had a spike there because the pharmaceutical tonics in the industrial park came in, so that was a boon. But we don't know when we look for new growth. We try to be optimistic and encourage working with developers and the businesses in town to see if we can foster some. But it really comes down to we're trying to be aggressive in estimating our local receipts so that we can show that the budget is increasing and incorporate some of the changes that we would like to implement. But a slowing economy can really adversely affect the budget if we're not estimating our local receipts properly. This year, you kind of saw earlier, but with this is our FY '24 estimated revenue growth with the 2.5% tax levy. That's about 1.77 million. Our new growth is 600. We anticipate our local receipts are going to increase about 328,000, as well as our marijuana revenue we think is going to increase about 130,000. So we're estimating revenue growth to be about 2.835 million. So like I said earlier, our FY '24 estimate is about 428,000 more than our FY '23 estimate for local receipts. There's some potential future changes. We're very hopeful about marijuana revenue. As you know, solar marijuana has opened up on Fonts Corner Road about a month ago. I think the marijuana revenue market is kind of leveled off. I think early adopters were able to cash in revenue-wise, but I think the market is leveled off, which is still a positive market. But I think there were some revenue estimates, particularly by the vendors, that were not really realistic. That being said, we think there's some new growth potential for FY '24 and '25. South Coast is expanding. Dartmouth Business Park, we hope, continues to expand. We have host community agreements for a marijuana grow facility and a retail facility. We're in the process of presenting to the select board up in the near future another host community agreement for a retail facility. So our hope is that they're open and functioning by FY '25, which does not help in FY '24. But we do have a number of new and proposed solar installations, which definitely help with new growth. And as I say, we continue to monitor the economy for inflation and recession indicators. So what are some of the municipal budget changes for FY '24? We're trying to address the select board goals of budgeting within the constraints of 2.5, long-range strategic planning, improving communication and transparency with the public, and improve our succession planning. What we're proposing this year for a position is a communications coordinator position. This position would provide communication and outreach to the public for all town departments. One thing we've really noticed in the past few years is there's so many means of communication with the public. We have our website, which we just upgraded. We have the engagement portal, which is relatively new a couple of years ago. But we still have issues with the public saying they're not aware of what's going on. They weren't aware of certain projects or initiatives, both positive and negative. We work great with DCTV, but they can't be the eyes and ears of the town. We really need a person that's committed to working with all the departments, working with all the media outlets, working with our website engagement portal, social media to really get the word out on what's going on. Positive is that this position replaces our confidential licensing aid position. Because of efficiency initiatives we implemented the last few years, all our licensing is online now. We used to have a full-time position dedicated to alcohol licenses, common vic licenses. Excuse me. We were able to eliminate that position. So we're not creating a new position, we're just replacing one with the other. The net cost increase is about $15,000 for that position. In addition to that, we have $35,000 in funding for some part-time scanning staff and also part-time clerical support in the select board office. Our part-time scanning staff are tasked with scanning all our paper property files. The new system, licensing system, all the files are incorporated once you upload them. Now we're going back to our historic files so people can search their properties and find all the information, whether it's building, health, conservation on their property. So that's about a third of the way done, but we're a few years away. So previously it was grant funded, but now we need to fund that part-time staff. What does that look like organizationally? Not an increase in full-time equivalents, but we're increasing $35,000 for the part-time scanning and clerical staff. The total delta from last year to this year's budget is $52,000 for this. Under facilities, we're proposing one new position, a facilities supervisor position. This will provide succession planning for park and recreation. As you know, Tim Lancaster, our park director, he oversees park and recreation, but he also oversees our facility staff, which we've consolidated the last few years to all work under one manager. But this new position would provide support to Tim to do that. It also would manage contract monitoring bidding for a number of facilities improvements, facilities procurement, and many of you that do procurement on a state level know the state has strict procurement laws, particularly around prevailing wage, which this would be very important for, and also OSHA compliance. So a few years ago, the state fell under OSHA compliance. They're very serious about health, worker safety. They come out, but there's a lot to maintain, so we need a person to help support that. This is kind of a rough idea of succession planning, but you can see we have one staff in recreation, we'd have one facility supervisor and the park director. If either of these were to leave, this provides some succession planning. The recreation director can do some park, park can do both rec and facilities, and the facilities director can do park. The facilities work for the park director. All right. That would be one increase in the full-time position. The equivalent of that is $65,000, which is the salary plus uniform allowance. So the total of the proposed changes, we also added an increase in employee training, minimal $7,500 to provide employee training for management training and also software training. And our MIS applications, we have maintenance agreements that have gone up, particularly Munis, which is our financial software. So the total increase for municipal side is about $175,834 this year. The Dartmouth school changes, it's been proposed this year. The school has proposed a 4.4% increase, totaling $2.126 million and adding 3.2 new positions. We've come back with what we find affordable for the town side, a 3.1% increase, also funding the 3.2 positions. But right now, we're at a difference of about $588,508 between the budgets. With that being said, I think town leadership has consistently supported Dartmouth schools, particularly beyond just the annual operating budget allocation. I'm going to show you some budget detail that elicits this, but we also need to address some current and future budget challenges for the school. The traditional way to look at the school versus municipal budget is like this. You've seen this before. Dartmouth schools is 51%. The Voc and Aggie school are 6%. The municipal budget is 43% of the budget. However, when you break that down, as you know, turnbacks help to fund capital. So budget turnbacks help to fund free cash, which we use to fund capital per our financial policies. Right now, the town turns back 97% of the funding that funds our capital through free cash. The school turns back 3%. However, the turnbacks fund 44%, 44% of our turnbacks fund the school capital, whereas 56% fund the town capital. So the average school capital funded through the town turnbacks is $1.443 million on top of the current budget. In addition to that, the general government side covers health insurance costs for all town employees. Currently, the school health insurance cost for the school employees is $2.7 million. This doesn't include anything related to collective bargaining. When you break down the numbers like that, you can see the actual general government is 38.6% of the budget. The Dartmouth schools are 55.2%, and the other schools are 6.2%. This is FY23, not FY24. So this is the actual budget distribution when you include turnbacks and health insurance. What does it look like on the pie chart now? You can see it's 61.4% of the town's budget goes toward the schools. It's reaching 2/3. So the municipal side, is pretty lean, and that's fine. But there is a lot of the funding goes towards the school, which the select board supports and the finance committee supports, and certainly the school committee supports. So we try to maintain that. But that's the breakdown, and it's it's more detailed than just the previous pie chart. When you look at what's proposed for FY24, we're looking to maintain that at 38.6%. If we implemented the school's 4.4%, the town's budget would be down at 37.9%. The schools would be up at almost 56, and the other schools stay at 6.2. When we look at traditional funding for the schools, I showed this slide last year. The school is having to fund asked for more and more funding every year. And you can see through the years, in 19, there was a 2.8% increase, 20 was 2.5, which is sustainable, even 3.2. FY22 gets to 3.5, last year was 4.7, this year was 4.4. We're proposing a 3.1 increase, but you can see where the costs are going and what the requirement on the school for their budget is becoming. And that's an average annual increase of 3.3% when we're trying to stay at 2.5%. This kind of elicits this point a little bit more. The gray area is the 2.5% annual track increase. So if the school's budget had stayed at 2.5%, you can see what that would look like. The actual budget, I mean, you can see the trend here where it's going. So not only do we have an issue this year, but moving forward, we see this issue only exacerbating. So we're trying to figure out how to deal with that. If you look at the budget over FY19 to FY24, the school has budgeted almost $5.8 million over 2.5, and that averages about $965,000 per year that needs to be funded for the school's budget above 2.5%. But even with continued financial support, the Dartmouth schools per pupil spending is still below state average. Mr. Kiley presented to the Finance Committee a few weeks ago a great presentation on where the town is as it relates to teacher spending, insurance and benefits, school administration, operation and maintenance, and the overall budget are all below state average. So the state sets up net school spending minimums that need to be maintained by communities. Dartmouth is at 122% of what is required of net school spending, but when you look at other communities with similar enrollments, Dartmouth is at the bottom of this, what they're required for net school spending. So that's significant when you look at other communities and how they're funding their schools. So Dartmouth is close to the bottom of that, but they are over the minimum of what's required. So what are some budget challenges beyond FY24? It really is, how do we address this trend of annual budget increases between 3.5% and 5%? How do we address the deficiency in net school spending, and how do we address the deficiency in per pupil spending? These are significant issues that we're facing not only this year, but really moving forward in FY25. Currently for this year, what are we looking at? We've got a $588,000 budget shortfall between the school and what the town is proposing. We really need to address the structural deficit related to salary funding at the school. There was the ESSER funding that was provided to schools, to all communities. They even recommended that that funding be committed towards salaries. However, it's just not sustainable. The funding terminates in FY25, and to date, the school has spent $1.63 million in this salary funding. So, we need to deal with that, and it goes against our financial policies, but we need to fill that gap and cover those costs. We also need to incorporate funding for new full-time employees for the school. Last year was 3.5, this year it's 3.2. So, how do we do that and maintain the budget in a consistent way? If we look at the municipal side, you saw the chart I was showing you. The municipal side is 38% of the budget. Just taking round numbers, the average salary, just not including non-union or contractual employees, it's $58,500. The town would be required to lay off the equivalent of 10 full-time positions to cover that. What we can propose, we have a vacant cashier position, $41,000. We have a vacant part-time accounting clerk position, and these are vacancies that we're able to attain because of efficiency gains, both internally between departments and using technology. So, but one item that we're proposing is every year in the capital that's funded through turnbacks for the school is a $200,000 allocation for school technology. We're proposing to put that into the operating budget to help sustain the school and the school's budget and their staffing needs. So we can realistically commit about $266,000 towards the school's budget gap. That still leaves an unfunded balance of $322,500. But budget reductions don't address the 3.5% to 5.5% school budget increase trend. It doesn't address the ESSER funding expiration. how do we address this in future increases? I mean, we have to have a realistic talk about an override. It's something that if the select board wants to consider, it takes a lot. I know generally town meeting does not like override, and the voters seem to like it even less. But, if we come up with, a good rationale, show them where the data is bearing out, that, it might be something that the town needs to seriously consider. But we also have some other challenges and opportunities in the future beyond the budget. We have some capital expenditures, both positive and negative. We still don't know the impact of this Mass DEP Title V amendments. Regardless of what those amendments bear out and what the result is, we still have a number of water and sewer infrastructure improvements that need to be implemented in town. We have Dartmouth school replacements that need to be done, not in the near future, but in very near future. We're looking at the Council on Aging renovations. That's a very well-utilized, well-used building with a lot of membership. This is another example of us taking a long-range approach to that facility and seeing what it can be over the long term, so we're funding a feasibility study. The Recreation Center, we funded the design, but that's something that, we did a very thorough feasibility study that bore out that there was a need in town for that. Bliss Corner, we still don't know what the effects of that will be over town. I mean, if we have Lake Nokichoke on there, still an unknown, in the Tucker Road intersection, which is smaller related to these, but it is, could be a capital expenditure down the road in the town. So some other challenges beyond FY24, what are the effects of inflation and these interest rate increases really going to bear out over time? We don't know, and how that is going to affect our budget here and our economy with our commercial businesses. The state could be facing some significant budget challenges for the same reasons. So, and that could possibly lead to a reduction in state aid, which would be very difficult to absorb. We have a number of, not a number, but we've got a few collective bargaining contracts unsettled. I don't know if anyone knew that. And then, health insurance is an expense we all are very aware of. The select board is keen on. It is something that we are definitely looking to address. But we also have OPEB obligations that continue to outpace our 2.5% levy growth. Like I said, long term, we have school replacements, Mass DEP, water and sewer infrastructure. Economic development wise, I don't want to sound dire, but the town does not have a lot of new developable commercial property. So we look to maintain these commercial developments that we have in town, make sure the businesses stay in their brick and mortar buildings, because that's important. I mean, we've been very fortunate that we have a mall in town that is one of our highest taxpayers, but is also very successful in this age of malls on the decline. This mall does very well. I make this analogy a lot. The mall is like the sun. It brings a lot of businesses into Dartmouth, all up and down 6. So we really want to maintain that. And once you start to lose 1 or 2 buildings, if the economy starts to slow down a little bit, you really see an exodus that happens fast. So it's very important to us to maintain the commercial business for the tax base. Financially, what do we need to do? Maintain strong financial policies. You saw those earlier. We try to maintain those. We really try to implement efficiency measures through technology and training of the staff. We really want to address the school budget trends. That's very important, particularly this year. Capital, we're always seeking grant funding for design and construction projects. We want to use our ARPA funding to the best of our ability and some state funding. I'll be before the select board probably within a month or so to talk about the next round of ARPA funding, but it's really going to be dedicated to water and sewer infrastructure, which is sorely needed. Like I said earlier, we conduct feasibility studies. We try to get grant money for feasibility studies to take a long-term approach at things. Dias Landing and Apponeganset Landing, we're trying to get a grant for a feasibility study to look at what to do with the whole area. Parking is an issue there. The small boat dockage facility is slated to start construction, so it's a great asset in town. We want to maximize it. We want people to utilize it, but we also want to make it enjoyable to be there and easily to access. And also to pursue regional partnerships. That's really important. Organizationally, we want to continue to implement efficiencies through service enhancements and staff reorganizations. You saw that last year. You saw what we're trying to propose this year. And economic development, like I said earlier, is important. Now that we've finalized the master plan and the open space plan, we've made a commitment internally to really evaluate it, make it a working document, look at ways that we can start to implement it. We have a great harbor management plan implementation committee that's been working very hard for the past year and a half. They're great group. They put in a huge amount of effort to help implement the harbor management plan, and they've been really successful. We want to implement our local rapid recovery planning grant, which provided us some opportunities, some funding for economic development on Route 6. And we continue to partner with UMass Dartmouth. The new chancellor's been great. He's very motivated to work closely with the town of Dartmouth. We've talked about a number of initiatives, both large and small, that we'd like to start pursuing in the next year or so. And our policy. I mean, we have the Charter Review Committee that's been working hard for a few years, that's really getting ready to formalize some of their recommendations, and also working on zoning changes that are required to implement the master plan. But we're in the here and now, and what we really need to address is where we're at with the school's proposed budget versus what the town's proposed budget is. It's not trying to be adversarial. Mr. Kiley's been great. We've had many discussions about what the needs are of the school. We are sensitive to that. We agree. It's just, where is the funding going to come from to provide that support? And you saw me show through the slides that there's not a lot of funding on the municipal side to really provide support for that. So we're looking for different ways to do that, but also, what are we going to do moving forward in FY25? And we've proposed these changes. We'd still be at about a $300,000 difference. What do we want to do about that? And with that, I'll take any questions. I'll go back to any slides if anyone needs more information.
I'd just like to take one moment first to thank Mr. McGinnis and his team. This took an extraordinary effort to put it together. It's a lot to absorb, and much appreciated to get this done and ready for this meeting. Thank you, all of you. Time for a deep breath.
I think we all might have some things to say about some. I appreciate what Mr. McInnes has put together, but I think some context about our budget was perhaps missing from there. And I think we would agree as a committee, I don't want to speak for my fellow committee members, that we would like to fully fund the operating budget of the town and the schools. But I want to be clear that, right, we're in a very different environment post-COVID in the schools. Our kids have increased needs. Did we use ESSER money to fund salaries? Yes, because kids need social workers, they need interventionists, because they're coming to us with much greater needs. We see on both of those slides that there's 3.2 new positions. Those are not wants, those are legal mandates. Right? We are legally mandated to provide services for students entering into our preschools. And we need a new preschool class because kids are coming in with more needs. We're going to have a finding soon that we are not meeting our obligations, our state obligations to English language learners. We need to hire someone to do that. So that increase that you see up there is about us having a fully funded operating budget and meeting the needs of our children as the state mandates that to us. We would like to not, I mean, I'm not the one to say we don't want to increase, like we'd like to try to do that, but the state has said, these are things that you have to do. And so I think it's important to be clear about this. These positions that we're going to sort of probably try to move people around to fill are things we must do. They're not optional. We're not allowed to. And I think that context is very important because it's not nice to have. It's fulfilling a state mandate about our legal obligations towards educating kids.
Let me just say one quick thing. Understanding how the state works. The state is, it's very easy for the state to come in and say, you need this, you need that, but they don't fund it. And that's where part of this problem is.
Absolutely.
This community in Boston is perceived as a rich community. I don't see it. I certainly don't feel it. And every time I pay my tax bill, it hurts. And, it's not, I think part of it is that the state needs to restructure its allocations so that the communities, if they stop mandating, you stop mandating, stop paying for it. Basically, help the community more. And we need to put the pressure on.
One level up, the mandates.
Yes, we need to put the pressure on Christopher Markey. We need to put the pressure on Senator Montigny. and the others. Because to be honest with you, and I know I'm gonna get in trouble for this, I really am, but I'm gonna say it. I think the state legislators have lost touch with its constituency. I really think so. When you move beyond the local level, you seem to have developed Alzheimer's, because you forget where you came from. And you're looking at the state picture, you're not looking at the local picture. State government is there to help the local government, and they're not doing it.
Next. Mr. Souza.
Yeah, to Mr. McDonald's point, I agree with him 100%. You know, but I keep hearing the same theme like, over and over again. It's the state fault, and it's the state fault. And he is correct. There's an absence of, there's a disconnect between our state representatives and town government. But we've got to take some blame for that. I think we've got to take most of the blame for that. And I'm not pointing fingers at any group here, but as our chairman stated, this is a pretty significant meeting and historic. Why aren't they here? Why weren't they reached out to and saying, we're having a problem? And you know what? We're not the only community that's having the same problem. And it's been going on for years. I think it's about time we take the bull by the horns and insist that our state representatives come to these type of meetings, and we reach out to them when we're facing significant problems and mandates from the states. We need to start pushing back. We need to start ringing the bell and telling them, we want you to go to your constituents up there at the State House, because they're all having the same problem, and make some changes. I'm tired of hearing, we got these busing mandates, we got this, the state requirements. Who's the state? They're people just like us. They're elected officials, appointed officials. We need to drag them in here, and that's on us. And we need to change our ways and get them more involved.
Mr. Garvin.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that, we've been meeting on the school budget. This year, we decided to spend more time on the school budget because it's such a big budget. And we actually have myself and Terry, were the liaisons to the school committee, to try to study the budget. We've probably spent four times the amount of time on the school budget this year than we have in the past. And in general, we spend a lot of time with Sean, so we understand what Sean does, and we understand why, the moves he makes and more efficiency and things like that. But we can't do that at the school level. And the budget keeps on going up year after year, and, but we don't know how many employees have a full workload. It's impossible for us to evaluate that. So we have varied opinions on the school budget within the finance committee, and that I think that is good. But I just wanted to point out, we can only look at what's presented to us. And when you look at transportation for the fiscal budget this year, and you look at the budget from last year of 3.7 million, it's going to, this year, the budget request is going to be 5.8 million. Transportation is going through the roof. Mm-hmm. If you take transportation cost away from the total budget, that leaves the general operating budget, net metering, and Medicaid. The school committee budget of 4.4% would fund, basically level fund, the general operating budget. If you use the budget that the town has recommended so far, the general operating budget goes down 1.5%. So the real issue is the transportation cost is taking up, transportation costs budget-wise went up 58% from last year to this year. Now, the previous year, it was, 2022 was 4.2 million, so the budget for last year was very, very low. And I'm not sure how that all came together. But so that, to me, when you look at just those numbers, it's impossible for the school to have less money in their operating budget in the next fiscal year. Something does not add up.
Can we address the transportation issue?
Yeah, well, can I just finish one more thing?
Okay.
One of the things that I think the committee agrees on is that for Schedule A presentation to the town committee, that the school budget that was voted on by the school committee should be in the department requests, and the budget that's recommended by finance should be in its right-hand column, and the select board should make a decision on what the recommendation should do. And
I think it'd be healthy for us, can we address that first, or is that?
I have a bigger picture that I like to address, but as far as, if you want to get an answer right now on transportation, I would defer to Mr. Kiley.
I think that's a good idea, and we'll be next. Thank you.
So our total other services budget, which is mostly transportation, there's a few other things included in there, nurses, athletics. That budget went up 7.9%. So, I mean, it's significant, I admit. Transportation, the increases are largely related to special ed transportation that's required by law, as well as homeless and foster care transportation, which are also required by law. The transportation environment, if anybody listens to anything relating to education, it's been one of the biggest problems this year and since post-pandemic. The lack of bus drivers are driving up cost. I agree with that. It's significant. That total area of the budget went up $400,000. It's a lot of money. But those are things that are mandated requirements. I can't do anything about those. I have to transport special education students who have it in their IEP.
Paying fuel and government mandates have chewed up all that money.
And homeless and foster care.
All these mandates you
Right.
have to follow.
Right, and special
But
education.
they're not just state mandates. I mean, it's a bidding process. We take the lowest bidder, but we all know that we don't want to go with a low bidder that has a poor track record,
One bidder,
and only one bidder.
one bidder. Every school district in the Commonwealth.
I would just like to, I'm really glad you brought this up, because obviously it's a giant number, it's a giant concern. And we just got an explanation that is unacceptable and terrible, but unavoidable as well. So, other than having the kids walk to school, I think we need to kind of accept the fact that this $400,000 or $500,000 is something we have to eat. Mr. Bowles.
May I make
hang
a
on.
comment? I mentioned this at the Finance Committee. You're never going to solve this internally. I'm just going to piggyback on what Mr. McDonald said. We have to do this at a state level. There's no way anybody in this room is going to solve this problem. It's got to be at the state level. And another thing has to do with, as far as I'm concerned, with school budgets. I think the state has to revisit and how these formulas are developed to who gets these state allocations and who does not. Now, we all know urban centers tend to get more money because they have low income and so on and so forth. But they have to really address these formulas. I mean, years back when I was on school committee, we had issues with that too. I mean, why is Dartmouth getting this and some other centers getting that? And to me, there wasn't a lot of logic behind it, and it wasn't really fully explained to us why Dartmouth was allocated this. And until we get these problems on a state level, solved, I don't see anybody in this room, coming up with anything to solve it. I really don't. It's out of our hands for the most part.
Mr. Oliver.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kiley would like to talk on this.
So the state is well aware of the issue of school funding. In fact, they enacted the largest increase in school funding in history a few years ago with the advent of the Student Opportunity Act. They changed the formula. And they changed the formula for specific areas, principally special education, because it was a broken formula. The issue is that in the new formula, we're still not the ones getting the money. There are communities right next door who are getting an extra $1.5 million with the Student Opportunity Act this year. We're not getting any, not $1 from that Student Opportunity Act. So they are aware that it's a problem. They have addressed a problem. But the thing is that the argument that they have made is that we need to divert money to those who need it most. And they are doing that. They just don't think that we're who needs it. And unfortunately, that's the way the formula, and we're not alone. There's more than 100 other communities that are in the same boat as us, where we're not getting anything out of this historic funding increase.
Thank you.
But just so you're aware, they did take action on it.
One back, Mr. Oliver?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
So I think we can all agree in this room this evening that something needs to be done. This isn't a school department problem. This is a town problem. The school department directly affects the most number of residents, in this town, with our population of 3,400, right around there, Mr. Kiley. We have the largest payroll. We should have the largest budget, as far as I'm concerned. That we have direct services. We are providing direct services to thousands of students, and we have a number of state, local responsibilities that we need to take care of. I'm just going to speak a little bit more about transportation, just so everyone in this room can understand. Special education costs. If we have to take a student and send them out of district to a collaborative, to a private school, we are responsible for the transportation, which it typically runs between $30,000 and $40,000 for one student for that one minivan. In addition, sometimes we need to provide for a monitor. That's not a maybe. Those are things that we have to do. If it's in the IEP, we have to provide. These are Dartmouth students that we need to take care of. We have a moral and a legal obligation to take care of these students. So I can certainly appreciate the transportation issue. It is a problem. We need to look at it. Long term, we certainly need to look at an override, but getting back to what we can do today, ESSER funds, we're well aware that ESSER was drying up. We were anticipating that. We were having conversations. We understand this is the last year. Next year will be the last year that we can use the funds. We're planning on that. So I can appreciate Mr. McGinnis's presentation and speaking to hiring staff with ESSER funds. That's what the money was there for. It was for the social workers. I think Dr. Jenkins had spoke about that. It was for the extra help to get our students through the tail end of the pandemic. So we're well aware of that. What we need to focus on right now is where we're at. There's a number of different options that I see, but I think what we need to be clear on tonight is that there is certainly a difference between what the school department is, the approved budget that we pushed forward, and what the town is recommending. There are certainly sources for one-time revenues that the school department can look at. We're certainly willing to be collaborative. At least I am. I can't speak for my colleagues, but I think they are. So there's certainly things that can be done. I guess the question with this, though, is exactly what do we want to do as a town?
Mr. Mickelson, thank you.
Well, interesting, Mr. Souza, Mr. McDonald mentioned the fact that we should get our state rep and our state senator before us. So I would like to send a letter out to both the senator and the state rep, and to get them in a meeting, at a select board meeting, and let's go over these questions and try to find some answers from the locally, so they can go back and find out why we're not getting the money that we need. Bring them in.
Ms. Ham? Thanks, Sam.
In terms of context, I just want to review that the Finance Committee has 2 liaisons to the school department, and since the beginning of the year, we've attended budget planning meetings, and whenever we've asked for information, it's been provided over and over again, in addition to the annual presentation that is given. I agree with what people said. I think it's important to reach out to our representatives. However, some of the laws that the school district is dealing with are federal laws. So it's not just state reps, it's federal reps. It's a long-term process. In my opinion, 2.5 has served its purpose and needs to be changed. Again, that's a long-term process that takes people organizing and contacting representatives, and it's not something that's going to solve problems today. I think it is important to have a study committee, in my opinion, and I don't speak for the Finance Committee, but in my opinion, we need more money. We need a bigger budget, not just for the schools. And in order to do that, in order to get support for that, there's need for a lot of education. The Finance Committee has participated in some webinars this year with the state, and one of the terms that was used was extreme outreach, and we think there is a need for that, because this is a crisis that we're in right now, but it's going to continue even when the emotions die down, and there's going to be a need to have people involved and determine whether they will support that kind of an increase.
Thank you. Ms. McDonald, next.
Yeah, one of the things that I think I'm going to go historian mode here. Oh, I'm going to go far back.
Okay.
Further than me.
When I was 18 years old, I became a town meeting member. I remember.
That's pretty fast.
Yeah, that's a while ago. I remember seeing the school budget come before town meeting. One line.
That's it. 2-minute presentation.
One line, that's it. And as a member of the Finance Committee, when I was 30, we had 4 lines. Administration,
Teachers. Staff.
staff, expenses, that's it. So the amount of information that us are getting from the school department budget is just astronomical. The amount of, so that has changed over a period of time. So, and you can see that even town meeting gets a better view of the school budget than it did 40 years ago. And Mr. Nunes can attest to that, because if there's anybody who has been on a board longer than I have, it's Mr. Nunes. And I served with Mr. Nunes. So things have changed over a period of time. Have they changed for the better? Certainly. The other thing is regarding, the transportation costs. As somebody who relies heavily on vehicles in his business, yeah, I know that it's changed. I know the gas has changed. And that's just absolutely ridiculous. My business gets hit with fuel charges that I've been fighting for the last 2 years. I tell the businesses it's part of their course of their business. Raise my rates, okay? I'll live with a rate increase, but don't tell me that you're gonna charge me 10% of my bill that's going to your fuel, when I know for a fact that going from portal to portal, it's far less. And I've cut services for that. I found new companies. But still, I'm aware of the transportation costs, and I am aware, because I sat there, of the mandates, the McKinley Act, and special education, that's not being addressed, and so what I don't want this to go to, and this is something that I don't want to be, this is us versus them, because there is no us versus them. This is we. We, the town of Dartmouth. And let's put it right on the table. Let's address the big gorilla in the room, and that's the override. This town has historically historically denied overrides. There was a couple times that the town has done specific, targeted overrides, which it did about 12 years ago.
2010.
Thank you. I was close. And we did an override for the police station. Well, we all know why that happened. Because we had a department that was coming up on 100 years that never had a home of its own. Now we have other things that we have to deal with. We have 2 schools that are over 70 years old. We have another school that is over 60 years old. Okay? We're sitting in a building that used to be the high school. Okay, we were fortunate enough to fight it to get to turn to this building. So we don't really need a town hall because we're pretty good right here. Yeah, it creaks, it rocks. It was a little concerning with us when we started the meeting whether or not this floor was gonna hold.
Over the old gym,
Yeah.
the girls'
Everywhere.
gym.
This is the gymnasium.
This is the gymnasium. So, this was part of the gym. That was part of the gym. So there is, this town has been lax in dealing with its infrastructure. But then again, so has the state, so has the federal government, so has everybody else, because buildings haven't become that important. And I remember years ago, way before, we had a superintendent that said, books, not bricks. And once that superintendent left, the bricks became very important. And the school department has done an outstanding job taking, for all intents and purposes, putting lipstick on a pig. Okay? Taking these buildings and treating them and making them viable buildings, but there's still, some of these buildings are inadequate. The ventilation in these buildings are abysmal. And we all know that. So, I mean, we do have a series of problems that we have to address, but we can't boil it down to an us versus them. This is a we. To be honest with you, the $266,000 that Mr. McInnes proposed is something entirely new for me. I didn't see that. I think it's a start. It might not be what everybody wants, but at least it's a start. So I think we need to focus on something like that. I don't expect negotiations here. I really don't. Okay, because the negotiations the discussions have to come out, Eventually, town meeting's gonna make that discussion, but some of the discussion that eventually has to be made is what does the people of Dartmouth want to do? Do they want to do a limited override, specifically targeting for certain areas, or do they want to do an overall override? Personally, I don't support an override, but I will put an override on the ballot for the public to support, because it's the public that has to make that decision, not this board, not that board, not that board. It's the public that has to make the decision. We have to give them the best information possible to make that judgment, because it's going to affect them. And by that meaning is, what does it mean in the pocket overall? What is the override? What is the amount? What is it going to affect on the tax rate? How is it going to affect my taxes? Now, we always put up, that the average home in Dartmouth is $421,000. Not too many of us have that average home. Some of us have less, some of us have more. So the question is how does that relate to my taxes? What do I gotta pay? What do you have to pay? What do you have to pay out of your taxes? What does that mean? So that's what we have to provide to the public, is what does that mean? And until we do that, any type of a discussion on an override is just basically
Can we go to the school committee?
So I just want to respond to a couple of things and then make a larger point. One, I'm not sure it was intentional, but I'm a little bit offended that there was a statement that our school personnel may not be fully deployed. And I invite anyone to come visit our schools and to see our teachers and teacher assistants changing diapers, putting in hundreds of hours after school for almost minimum wage with these kids. I don't think that was intentional, but at the same point in time, our people work hard, right? And that needs to be recognized in the record. The other thing that I want to say, I don't, this is us, right? We have to decide it. Getting the state in here to talk about this is not going to fix the problem. An override, that's not going to fix the problem here either. We got to fix the problem in the here and now. Those are longer term solutions. I don't think the state's going to be sympathetic to us. Our tax rates are low. It is brutal to pay our taxes, but taxes are the price we pay for living in a civilized society. Our police keep us safe, our teachers educate our kids, our Council of Aging care for our seniors. We have to pay when we want excellence in those services. The last thing I will say, I appreciate the effort to move us forward with the $200,000, but we still have technology needs. Those don't go away. If we use that capital to fund operating expenses, I don't know how we fund technology, right? So we're kicking the can down the road. So what we need to is to not kick the can down the road and figure out how to solve the problem now. I agree with you, Mr. McDonald, we're not going to be able to do it tonight with 20 of us around the table. It's like editing a document by committee. That doesn't work. I think we all agree that we're all in this together, but we've got to be willing to pay for the services that we as a community enjoy.
I'd like to say something, if I may.
Go ahead.
We have some severe long-term problems, not only with the state allocations and the mandates and the stuff we don't want to do, but we have to because of these formulas. We have some severe infrastructure issues, not just with the schools. We've been talking about water and sewer every single meeting we have. We have giant issues when it comes to what this town wants to pay for in the short term and the long term. If we don't address the water and sewer treatments in this town, we may end up with catastrophe. So we need to really put these issues into place. There's long-term issues that we are not going to solve, but we're going to address. We even have a small subcommittee that has already met once on the strategies of long-term planning and what has to be done and when it should have to be done and what's it going to cost. And with all due respect to the schools, water and sewer is number one on the list when it comes to infrastructure. Everyone in this room wants clean water and wants a sewer system that works, that's affordable. Everybody, because it affects us every day. So I think that we have issues that I think my sense is that we have some short-term issues that have to be solved before town meeting. And my sense about all this is, whether it's 200,000 or 300,000 or 400,000, we need to meet in a small group and say, can we solve this and find ways in the short term only to solve these problems, just to get us by. And my perspective is, and I'm going to add one more thing. I came to the finance committee years ago when there was a one line for the school budget as well. And we made a promise way back then that we would fund the schools at least $1 million per each year, and we've done that. And we still haven't caught up. It's a disgrace in a sense that we are so low on the pecking order when it comes to school funding statewide. We haven't caught up. And there's not a person in this room that doesn't want to catch up. So how do we do that as well? And I think that we have a lot to do, but we need to focus first and foremost on the very, very short term to get us through this picture, but also know that the long term is critical for us to look at the costs of running our schools and getting clean structure. Mrs. Brooks, you wanted to speak. Thank you.
I feel like I'm repeating some of the things that people have said, but I agree that when we send an invitation to our state and federal reps to come and speak to us, they may or may not choose to come, and I believe that they will not come with solutions. So although it may be nice to sit across from them, we're not going to be any further ahead than we are right now. In Mr. McGinnis's presentation, I want to capitalize on the number of automated services that the town hall has been able to put into place. As he said, they have the ability to eliminate a position because they have all these services that they're putting online. School department can't put those things online. We tried that during COVID. And it doesn't work in educating kids. They need people. People cost money. Good people cost good money. Although I will admit, I was taken aback today when I saw the article in South Coast at the offer to the superintendent, the new superintendent of schools, knowing that that price tag is probably about 8 TA salaries. I guess I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. Good people need good money. She better be damn good for $200,000. I also think that there's been a show of solidarity between the teachers, the DPW workers, and the police department who have come to meetings and stood quietly in the back. When the teachers are standing here, and this is historic every 3 years when they go for their contract, when they come here and ask us to better fund their health insurance, they're doing that for every department in town. And it's finally, I'm seeing these other departments show up, because in the end, if the DEA wins, they all win. So I'm glad that they're putting their bodies where their pocketbooks are. That's another thing. Good people cost good money. Good people are not looking at our town still when we look at that health cost differential versus other communities. We can sit here as town residents and say this is the best town to live in. We've got a great educational system. We've got beautiful beaches and beautiful trails, well kept. It's just a jewel. But if they're looking at other communities who have other attributes and a better ratio when it comes to health care costs, they really don't care what we look like. The biggest number of town employees live right here in the town. So when we're talking about increasing taxes through an override, we're talking about hitting them in both directions. We'll give you more money through this contractual services, but in order to do so, we're going to need an override. So now we've given it and we've taken it, which is very hard to swallow. And I don't think it is just an override. I am no longer employed by Dartmouth Public Schools, so I can say that. But when I drive down the streets of Dartmouth and hit every bump and hill and valley in the road, I want an override to fix these darn streets. The bottom line is there's not enough money. And I don't want a windfall through ESSER funds or COVID funds coming, because I don't want another COVID. But I want Dartmouth to figure out how we're going to live up to the image we have in our head of what it is to be here. And we need to solve that. As we've said, we need to solve that now. That being said, we can't look to say this one-time source, we're going to go and dip in this bucket and get money. Because what I'm seeing is we're going to be dipping in that bucket every year. And that bucket is not filling up fast enough for us. We've got to find a way for all of that to come together.
Mr. Garvin, thank you, Ms. Brooks.
Yeah, I just want to wrap up. I just want to, we feel pretty confident that, we're getting close for this year, and that, within a couple $100,000 on a $52 million budget that, we're getting where we need to be. We're more concerned about the future years. And, the full-time equivalents, like I said, I understand that these people are required, but again, we have no way of knowing that of all the employees, there can't be other cuts, so that we don't add full-time equivalents. And if we can't even fund, we're adding full-time equivalents, and we can't even fund their health care to what they need. So we add a couple of people, and as you know, when you add people, nobody knows about it, but boy, when you lay somebody off, it's all over the news. So we would like to avoid that as much as possible. So it's the full-time equivalents we're concerned about. We also, the ESSER, when the ESSER funds run out, we're self-funded on unemployment, so if there are cuts and people go on unemployment, that the general fund's gonna have to end up paying for those unemployment benefits. So we're concerned about that. And the last thing we're concerned about is, as the school department is going up and up and up as far as the percentage of the total town budget, you know, when an agreement comes, and there will be an agreement on the health care, that's not gonna be a savings. That's gonna be a very significant amount of money. And things to us, things seem to be accelerating on the cost side. So, like I said, you know, we're fairly confident that we're close for this year, but come next year, I think we're gonna have a major issue. Other towns have had this issue a year. This year, we're gonna probably have that problem next year.
Mr. Oliver?
So I'll address a couple of things. One being, this town elects a school committee. That school committee is responsible for overseeing the budget and overseeing requests for new staff. That is why the 5 of us sit here on this board. We're the ones that get into the nitty-gritty about what FTE we need, what FTE we don't need, where we can possibly make reductions, and where we may actually need to add staff due to class sizes or due to related service providers. So in my opinion, that is something that the school committee has direct authority over, and we can present that information, and I think Mr. Kiley has done a phenomenal job this year presenting it from the Finance Committee. And I do get taken back a little bit, and I don't want this to turn into the us versus them. However, I feel as though that the school department continues to get, for lack of a better term, you know, their finger pointed at, because it's the school department's budget that keeps going up and up and up. Well, guess what? School departments are the #1 reason people come to this town, the Dartmouth Public Schools. Make no mistake about it. I will say that we're about $350,000 apart. We have a contractual obligation with our bargaining units that we are right in the middle of, and if we cannot come to terms with the numbers very shortly, we will have no choice but to start riffing people and putting pink slips out. That's where we're at. We have till May 15th. That's the deadline that this committee has in order to make those notifications. I want to work together. I think we all want to work together. Let's talk about school choice. I'm proud to be on the first school committee that approved school choice. I know most of us agree with it, some of us don't, respect that. And all it takes is one election for school choice to go away, because it's voted in every year. So as far as using, because that came up in a conversation earlier tonight, let's look at maybe using one-time revenue sources such for non-reoccurring charges from school choice. But school choice is not definite. Next year, there could be a new election, and school choice goes away. And we have what we have there, and then it's going to dwindle away to nothing. So as far as using school choice funds to fund reoccurring costs, I'm against it, and I know most of my colleagues probably are against it as well. We just simply can't do that. If there is something in place for next year, you know, when we're looking at FY25 now, and talking about overrides, talking about other funding sources, then maybe we can have a conversation about doing something with one-time revenue. But where we're at right now, this committee and this school department we're coming to a point where we've got to make a decision as to what we're going to do.
Mr. Nunes, you have a question?
Yeah, I got a few, Mr. Chairman, thank you. First couple go to Mr. McGinnis. The numbers that you had regarding, you know, state budget and such, does that include not that it's a lot of money, but the House Ways and Means numbers, or are you using House what?
The governor's.
We're using the governor's budget. The House Ways and Means budget was a slight increase. If you look at the last, I just did an analysis for the town administrator. If you look over the last 6 or 7 years of state aid that was given to the town, the minimal amount that was given was somewhere in between the governor's budget and what's ultimately budgeted in conference committee, which is their final budget that gets reviewed after the Senate looks at it. So we're still looking at that and see whether or not there could be maybe additional funding that comes down the line. We're not 100% sure because obviously they haven't completed that yet. As you know, when a new governor comes in, they're allowed an additional month to provide budget numbers, and that's where we are. We're kind of almost a month behind on what we should be, almost like the Senate's budget right now, but we're still House Ways and Means. So we hope to have a little more better data once that comes in, but it's still a ways away.
I have a comment. Mr. Nunes has the floor in a moment, but unless someone has an absolutely dire need to say something that hasn't been said or add to the conversation, we ought to stop this conversation as soon as we can. And we're not leaving here without a solution that's going to take us to that May 15th date. Whatever it takes for us to meet, whoever it's going to take, we need solutions. We're not going to leave without it. That's my opinion. I don't know about the rest of our board here, my colleagues, nor do you over, but I think that we need to give this every effort to come up with a plan to get us through at least the short-term problems that we can agree on. The long-term issues, we'll have another meeting, and we'll meet and look at that thing, because I think it's a disservice to this magnificent group of people here trying to solve a problem. Our teachers in the background in our town, that we don't do our best effort by May 15th, which is, at least seems to be the deadline, that we don't come up with some way to at least solve the short-term problem. Mr. Nunes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another question that I have, and again, I understand, putting my town finance hat on, that it may not, but where do we stand local receipts year-to-date versus what we've budgeted?
Okay.
So what we've budgeted on local.
Gary, I apologize. I understand that not all the big motor vehicle has just come in,
Right.
and that, I got that.
Yeah, so I can give you a briefing on where we are in March. We're actually pleased to say that we are in line with our budgeted revenues that we've had projected for last year. As Mr. Nunes is aware, we've just put out the first commitment. Demands will be sent out. The biggest factor of local receipts is motor vehicle. So we're still 3 commitments off, and that's only because the registry has not given us those commitments yet. But I foresee that we will probably increase our revenues by maybe 100,000, and we thought that maybe, COVID was going to play a piece of this last year where we didn't have sales, but I'm pleased to say that we did not decrease our revenues on local receipts as far as the motor vehicle is concerned. Another point is investment income. As you know, investment income right now, CDs are probably about 4%, increasing to 5%. We did get a good rate with a local bank. We're doing it again. So we're trying to capture as much revenue as we can in this budget to offset the expenses that we're foreseeing. And those are the 2 biggest swings right now, our motor vehicle receipts and trying to capture as much investment income as we can. And we're doing everything we can to try to mitigate and try to gain as most investment income as we can.
Mr. Nunes, if you don't mind, let me just follow up on that, because this is the question that I have. Historically, let's go over the last 6 years. What we projected for local receipts versus what was actually taken in. New growth projections versus what actual new growth is. What is that difference? Can there be a reasonable is also defined in many ways, a reasonable attempt to increase the local receipts and the new growth? In other words, can we say that instead of 600,000 for new growth, it's 700,000? Has new growth over the last 4 or 5 years that has actually been more than what we projected?
Well, you see up here on the slide, so, we estimate $600,000 for new growth. It could go up. Last year, like I said, in FY '22, we had tonics, FY '19, '21, okay. Like I said earlier, we're pretty aggressive with what we're estimating for local receipts. That's not super prudent. I mean, you never know what's gonna happen, particularly when it comes to our local receipts. It fluctuates a little bit. We're optimistic, but 21 happens that has an effect on the overall budget. So we're estimating pretty close to what the actuals are. We should, I'd be more comfortable if they were less, but we're trying to make the budget work, and we've been successful to reach that. But a dip in the economy, and you're watching it with interest rates, we don't know what's going to happen. And then, so we try to be very careful about this. We want to be optimistic and aggressive, but also cautious at the same time. So it's not easy to find that balance.
Right, and I understand that, and I understand that part, but I know the town, people have been very super conservative as far as dealing with these types of issues. And the question is whether or not, are we being too conservative?
I would say that you are probably correct. In the past few years, we have been ultra conservative, maybe moderately conservative, but we've built this budget on a lot of assumptions that we hope are going to happen, marijuana being one of them, and new growth at 600,000 in a community that is potentially, how many new subdivisions are coming in, how many new houses are being built. So that's something that we really have to monitor. I wouldn't want to say that we put $1 million in new growth and we get 400,000. Then we have a budget gap that we have to deal with next year. So we're being as cautious as we can with these numbers in an hyperinflationary time in our economy. And my opinion is we have conservative numbers in here. If we can tweak them, as we go along, we definitely will sit down and look at that. But I know, not to prolong this anymore, but I know that we talked about this when I gave my presentation on January 9th about having this BAG committee, Budget Advisory Group, and we talked about it potentially after the town meeting. I think that we probably need to start meeting now, and we need to start having those conversations now, so that we can at least both sides and maybe come back to the select board and say, listen, this is the short-term approach that we have. We can get by this year, but what we need to really address is 25, 26, 27, and 28. That's where the issues are. Because if we're $500,000 or whatever the number is this year off, can you imagine what that's going to be in 25? Imagine what that escalates to 26. So I appreciate that we want to just talk about what's happening today, but kicking the can down the road and looking at what's going to happen in the future needs to happen today.
Gary, not for nothing, but we were having this conversation in 2018 when we saying we have to be careful with 2020, 21, 22, 23. In 19, we were saying we have to be careful with 22, 23, 24, 25. And in 21, we were saying we got to be careful with 23, 24, 25. So this is the same conversation that seems to be cyclical every 4 years.
I think if we have a lot of people in this room right now on multiple boards, I think that we need to have that conversation now. And not just, as you mentioned, talk about it, but really have concrete discussions about where we want to be.
Thank you. Any other comment, Mr. Nunes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just, something I'm looking at, and this is right from the Bureau of Accounts, the free cash proof comparison, and the excess of local receipts in FY '21 was $1,067,000, and in '22 was just short of 1.6 million over what the estimate was. So.
It was larger than that in previous years as well.
Yeah, but that being said, to your point, or Sean's, and I say this all the time and you get upset, Mr. Chairman, but I'm going to say it anyway. If we got what we should have for per pupil spending, we wouldn't be having this discussion because we'd have $9.9 million more. So we wouldn't have to have this discussion and we'd be golden.
If my brother was my sister, I'd have two sisters.
It would have been nice, and these are my opinions. When the state had that nice surplus last year, and yes, they gave some of it back to us, whoopee-ding. If they had given some of it back to the town to use, they didn't. They put it who knows where with the fund projects and that type of deal. Some comments have been made about salaries and such. Again, and I know my colleagues have talked about it, we're in the people business, okay? 75% of this budget is salary staff, okay? Is the salary for the staff, okay, the teachers. If we don't have the teachers, then we, just close the doors and go home.
Yep.
It's as simple as that, okay? Personally, I don't appreciate doing negotiations with the superintendent's salary in public. Okay? My opinion. Because I'm of the firm belief, say what you want, and again, my opinion, you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. So, we've got the right person on the job. We negotiated a contract.
Did our
That's,
research.
we did all our research, and that's it.
Okay. We'd like to move,
May I?
Go ahead.
I've been on the Finance Committee for a few years. Just one very specific comment about local receipts. The previous finance director always under-budgeted local receipts as a way to actually generate, hopefully by the end of the year, more free cash that would then be used for capital projects. It was his strategy. It's not the current administration's strategy. I applaud the level of transparency that we're getting now from both Sean and Gary. It's been huge. Let me add a couple of other things. I think the problem we're trying to solve is very solvable. I think the problem we're trying to solve in the next several years requires some really heavy thinking. I happen to believe, I was just looking, if the average property tax is $36.96 here, if I may say, the average property tax is $36.96. If we're doing the average of the state, which is $43.09, according to some document, whether it's true or not, if we did multiply that by how many property owners, that would bring in $11 million more. That is not what's going to happen. But what we do need to do is get very specific. I'd almost put, if we paid people what we think they should be paid, we are not able to hire now in half the departments. We are not able to hire. We're not providing competitive salaries or competitive benefits in many departments. What if we did do that? What would that cost us? What if we fully were able to take care of our water and our sewer? Let's figure that out. Let's just say we add that all up, and let's say it happens to be $8 million a year to do what this town needs to be done. Forget this year. We're talking about, let's solve this year, have less free cash this year. I don't care. I'll be honest. What I want is enough money going forward to compensate people appropriately, as they should be, not just nickel and dime people, and also to pay for our facilities as they need to be paid for. I could take some things off that list of facilities because they aren't as high priority. If we get that and we say, okay, it is, add it all up, it's going to be $8 million to fully fund all these extra things, then we need leadership on the part of the select board, the school committee, the finance committee, excuse me. And we got to go to town meeting and say, guess what? This town has been underfunding people, facilities, and the quality of this town. I happen to be a very fortunate person. My taxes have been going down in the last several years. Guess why? Because in order to stay with 2.5, the people whose property values have gone up because they were a $200,000 house is now a $300,000 house, their property tax went up way more and mine went down. I'm a lucky person. Guess what? I think that's sick. I think the way this 2.5 is administered doesn't make sense for the people with the more expensive houses actually get a decline because you have to stay within the 2.5. We have got to address some of these things, and it's not that hard. We just have to sit down and do
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's not that
Any
hard.
comments from you, Mr.? I think it's time, if I get any disagreement, raise your hand now, but I think it's time for us to walk out of here with a plan. And I think it should be a short-term plan. Short-term only. Not to say, and Gary has made it very clear to us that the long-term plan is critical to look at, and that's going to be our job. Right now, we got to solve this problem, period. Mr. McGinnis, any comments or questions on solving the problem or how we do it?
Well, I mean, I think, Gary's point was valid. I mean, we talked about this last year. The school had a large increase in their budget. We were able to compensate for it, but we talked about when we got to this year, it was going to be, we saw the trend. Gary's right. The trend next year is going to be even worse. So long-term thinking needs to happen, right after town meeting to really make some decisions about what that cost is going to be, what we're going to fund, and what the approach is going to be. Because, pulling it out of the general operating budget for the future, is not sustainable because there's still capital. There's short-term capital, long-term capital, the things that we need to address. In the short term, I'm happy to meet with Mr. Kiley or as a group that we can, look at ways to kind of bridge this gap, and we've presented some options. The options of the school technology is, yes, it's a short-term option because do we want to lose staff or do we want to take a step back in technology? I mean, that's a decision beyond me. That's what we want to do. We're presenting options. So we realize it is a bridge to get to FY25, but FY25, there needs to be a commitment, on the whole town's part to really fund the schools because, it goes back to, salaries and health insurance. We agree. It helps with recruitment and retainment, and I agree. When we have phenomenal staff here in Dartmouth, in my years abroad, the staff and the people here are really committed to the town. It is, you saw it tonight, but I see it on a daily basis here. So we want to promote that and foster that, and they deserve that. It's, it has to be affordable. And there's discussions in the room, but then there's discussions and opinions at town meeting, and then there's discussions and opinion at the ballot box. And getting them all aligned is not that easy. The short term.
Do you need more firepower and more people involved in a short, smart committee to try to find these sources to bridge the gap for this year? What's the best way to get this done?
I would suggest first Gary and I meeting with Mr. Kiley to try to really, sharpen our pencils and look at what we can do, and then come back to the board. But we would need to do that soon because the select board needs to vote on the warrant on May 8th, which is 2 weeks.
I will make a proposal.
I want to limit any comment to do about the short-term solution. The conversations, I think, are over because we need to.
No, I do have a short-term solution,
Okay.
very, very short-term. Should be a two-pronged attack. A, you still should look at the state, what the state can do for us. Secondly, I hear about expenses, but I don't hear anything about revenue opportunities. That should be thoroughly investigated. What more can we do to get some more
100% agree, and those are my notes, but that's not going to solve the problem.
Well, it
by May
will if
15th.
we expand and get a committee to.
Absolutely.
Okay, that was my next point.
Yep.
Let's get a committee together and try to get some solutions to how we can raise extra revenue. And rather than suggesting that we lay off people, cut expenses, to me, that's not a problem solver.
Agreed.
No, let's get some revenue in here, let's find a committee.
My short-term solution is we come up with the full amount, whether there's cuts or something for this year. Then we sit down, because guess what? What it'll mean is we have less surplus next year for less capital going forward. The capital going forward, that funding will be, we will not have as much money for capital in the fiscal year 25, but guess what? We'll have to address that through our planning, but much more comprehensive planning. So fund the friggin' thing now, and then put it into context of what we have to be doing.
I would like to say that I think that we're all saying the same thing about, but I don't know protocol too well, but I'm asking, is it appropriate that each one of these boards vote, not on the short-term solution, because we're going to do that, is what do we do come town meeting and after about long-term solutions, and how do we do it? And at least a commitment by these three boards that we're going to do it. And a vote taken by all three boards that whatever that motion is, we all vote on it and support it. We walk out of this room with a commitment. The short term is up to Mr. McGinnis, Mr. Kiley, Mr. Carrero, and anybody else they want to help, but they're going to get it done. So May 15th, we don't have to start chopping heads because that's unacceptable in my view. But I'd like to get a commitment on long-term solutions right here out of this table so that come town meeting, we're ready to go. And we can talk about, maybe each board brings a recommendation. Who should be on it? What are the committees? We can do that individually. But a commitment to walk out of here, we're going to do the damn thing and get it done. Mr. McKinney, you had a comment? No, somebody did? Yes.
So I will just note, history repeating itself, talking about history here. I first got involved in town, volunteering for the town when we set up, I believe it was 2006, maybe-ish. We had a budget review task force, and it was a group of people from all over town sort of looking at these questions. I mean, it sounds kind of like that's what we're doing, what we're proposing is that same thing that
When we were shutting off streetlights.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And what did that do?
We were so far underfunded the schools that we had to have a special committee go out and scream and yell because the schools were getting nothing. And that was my first foray into politics. So
Pay tons of fees.
We don't want to shut the lights off.
Yogi Berra said deja vu all over again.
Mr.
Mr. Tennell,
any other guidance in terms of?
No, but Ms. Jenkins brings up a good point. That's something that's not traditionally done, but there's a lot of collaboration that could happen between the town and the school. We look at some of the, structure departments we have, IT, facilities, looking long-term, it might be worthwhile looking at ways we can kind of consolidate those roles and maybe kind of reduce staff between the two to save money. So those are things that I think they're worth looking at over the long term.
I mean, I'm just going to get on my soapbox one more time. One of the things I've always said, and I said it in the past, and really nothing's being done, and I see just the start of it here, which is the facilities manager that's being proposed for Parks, Rec, and the town facilities. I've always said the town has a facilities group. It's the maintenance department from the school department. There's no reason why the maintenance department and the school department can't be farmed out for the town so the town gets charged. You guys can create a bill that if Rick or Bob or whoever, Steve goes out and does something in this building, that it gets charged to the town. There's no reason why. We have that here. Why can't we use it? It's not being done. And that's the one thing that's always bothered me. Because this is my business. My business is property management. My business is maintenance. I see this, and it's an untapped facility that this town has not taken advantage of. And I'm a little bit bothered about that. And if that's the time, I know it's going off a little bit off Pluto while we're talking about Jupiter, but still, I mean, it's another way that the town could save some money.
That'll be our first contribution to the group. Thank you.
Mr. Tannenbaum, can I just, we're wrapping up, so I think what we need to do is maybe not a vote from the committees, but maybe a commitment from the committees that and work closely with Jim over the next week or so to try to close this gap and move forward with this, but know that immediately that we talk about a committee that will be formed on, maybe a couple members there, maybe a couple members here, maybe a member of the select board.
Or maybe more than one committee as well.
Right, and we put that together and we start talking some serious talk about what's going to happen in 25 and beyond. But I think that maybe a commitment from just, a small commitment, maybe not a vote, but we end maybe with that. And both Sean and Jim, we work together well. I think we can get it resolved.
Comments?
You were looking for a solution tonight.
Yes.
And I believe Ms. Heidi Cooper just gave us a solution. As a member of the Finance Committee, I feel that she understands where we are with the funds that we have. And if she feels that we can do this to solve this budget issue.
Well, she'll deliver that whole idea to Mr. Carrero and we'll, okay? Anybody else? I think specific ideas should be funneled to Mr. Carrero, to Mr. McGinnis, and we have a deadline. Like, we're going to do this like tomorrow and the next day. We got to protect those teachers that could be on the chopping block. That's unacceptable.
So our next meeting is May 8th.
May 15th.
No, May 8th, they vote on the warrant, which is the Schedule A, which is the proposed budget.
So
That's our next
we don't have a
meeting.
lot
We're
of
going to
time.
get it done before then.
That's all right. That's fine.
Midnight oil.
Sounds
good, right?
They stunk.
Midnight oil?
Yeah, they were a terrible band.
Mr. Town.
Mr. Souza.
Just one more comment. I
Sure.
apologize, it's not on the solution, but I have to comment on the silent protests we've all witnessed over these last few months.
John, can you speak into the,
And the,
comment on what?
the silent protests we have witnessed by our teachers and other unions in the town. And I got to comment on their behavior and how proud I am of the hard work they do, the commitment they have to this town, and the behavior that they exhibit to us, and the respect that they've shown elected officials and appointed officials. Too many times we watch news and we see union negotiation contracts go really sour, and it turns into threats and violence. I've got to commend these people that we've had none of that, and I applaud them for that. Good for them, you know.
Okay. We have a commitment, on the short term, and we're going to, our three groups separately will meet to come up with specific plans or committee structures or ideas of what the committee should be, so that once we get a clear town meeting, we're going to be on our way, because it's as critical as out. Mr. Bowles?
May I make a suggestion? Now that we're all here, why don't we ask for volunteers right now, tonight, to get this thing rolling?
I think committee, my view, is the committee ought to talk about it, come up with a plan that you all can agree on.
I think we should be,
Okay. I personally would like to discuss it with our group and come up with what we think
First?
would be the
All right.
structure. So I don't know
Okay.
about anybody else, but,
Yeah.
okay.
Agreed.
We'll discuss it.
Dr. Jenkins said legislate by, what'd you call that before, by?
Editing a document by committee, it's
Thank you, okay, great. I just have one thing to follow up on, Mr. Souza. Great respect for the teachers and what they've done, and they've given us, they've been here often, and they put their time, they've been teaching all day and come in here after that. Not unnoticed by all of us, for sure. In the attempts, the goals of this group have been, we have great people here, great people, and it's okay to disagree. My feeling has always been, as long as you're informed and you listen and then you have your opinion, it's yours. That's why democracy works, and I think that's what we're trying to do here, and I think it's very productive, and appreciate everybody's attitude. We're going to get this thing done, because we got a lot of decisions to make for the future of the town. Okay?
I'd like to make a motion on behalf of the school committee that we adjourn into executive session for the purposes of update on negotiations for union and non-union personnel, not to reconvene.
I'll second that.
Great.
Sounds like a powerful meeting you got going there. You thought ours was hot, yeah.
So we want to make a
Just call for a roll call.
recommendation. So we want to make a recommendation.
Hold on, we need the roll call. Can you give us a second,
Motion
please?
to adjourn.
Okay.
They're
John
gonna,
Souza
they need to
made
roll
it.
call.
We need to roll call first.
Need a roll call.
Chris Oliver?
Yes.
1 second.
Shannon Jenkins?
Yes.
Yes.
Nunes?
Kathleen
Yes,
Em.
Kathleen
All right,
Em.
thank you.
Thank you.
Now,
Said here, where do you stand on a meeting? You need to do the same?
Well, we got to adjourn. So, somebody want to make a motion to adjourn? John Souza
Thank
make
you.
a motion to adjourn. Second by Terry. All in favor, aye. Any opposed? None.
Okay, a 5-minute break, and we'll resume back in 5 minutes.
4 minutes or 3.